Welcome to 2020, a brand new decade of Toronto real estate, and Street View is here to deliver some solid insights on community developments that are very exciting for the main Danforth pocket in the East End, along with year-ending results for the Toronto real estate market overall. Come on, we got lots of great stuff to get covered today. Let's jump in. Toronto City Councillor Brad Bradford has just finished his first year in office representing Ward 19, which is Beaches, East York. And Brad has highlighted a project that is a really great example of some of the good community development that's happening in our city. And I'd just like to highlight it very quickly. It is the Main Street Planning Study, which is an initiative that is coming from the city, and it is being overseen by our local city councillor. And what Brad has done is he's struck a stakeholder advisory committee, had a town hall meeting in September, and they've come up with 3 key initiatives to be focused on in this area. And the first being taxes and city policy that affects how this area is developed, the public realm, public space inside it, and then lastly, transit and accessibility. And so it's very interesting, these 3 key initiatives. And it's centered around helping find solutions to vacant storefronts and the challenging environment many businesses on these main streets face, which is a common thread throughout the city. And what makes a neighborhood very vibrant and valuable for a lifestyle choice, and in turn, real estate value, is finding solutions that support local business owners to create jobs and to create a diverse community. And with this great shift to online retailing, et cetera, you can see how it's becoming an increasing struggle. But there's also another facet of it. It's increasing commercial property taxes. And this is where the city comes in. So Brad's focused on the right things. In conjunction with the City of Toronto actually creating this study plan and hiring none other than SVN architects and designer and urban planners. Let's just pop the slide up. Okay, there it is. And if you're unfamiliar with SVN, they are a very well award-winning, reputable firm that focuses on architecture, planning, urban design, and strategy. And they have a similar project where they've designed an integrated transit-oriented development at Mimico GO Station in the West End. And it's a really great example of good urban design. And this is what makes our neighborhoods desirable and more valuable and creates more inclusive urban living, because urban living is becoming increasingly challenging. And if you've driven through the city lately, you understand what that's all about. We're not building more roads. We are building more public transit and having communities that are wrapped around these transit opportunities. Is just fabulous. I'm very excited about it. And being equally excited about this particular study area is, of course, the Lynx Condos and the development that we introduced to our audience a couple months ago. And several of us took advantage of that project, and I think it's doing quite well. It's sold now close to 78%. There are still some great opportunities, and given the context of what I've just talked about, that this area is such a phenomenal find in the East End. And there's actually an additional highlight that we forgot to mention that was announced in November. Toronto's newest community center is going to be right on top of the GO train station. It's going to be a revamped GO train station with 3 towers that are going to have both residential, freehold condo, but also affordable housing, like affordable rental housing, integrated in these 3 towers that are like between 40 and 50 stories. It's the perfect part in the city to have that kind of height with the surrounding real estate and the shadow effects to the community. But it's also another example of how this study area and the initiative by the city is driving some of this beautiful design. I mean, come on, it's great. So Lynx Condos, there are still some opportunities, and I thought I would just highlight one of them for you. An O3 layout, which is 697 square feet, a 1-bedroom plus den. They have them available from the 14th floor or higher, and it's currently being offered at a price of $659,000. And of course, parking, locker in addition to that. And I know that sounds very expensive, but it is under $1,000 a square foot. And when you add up all the benefits and features of a brand new property, it is a very good deal. And so there are other opportunities for bigger units. They have some family-sized units there that are 2 and 3 bedroom. There are still some of those opportunities there. If you're interested, reach out and we can share those details with you and figure out if this type of opportunity is the right fit for you, whether it be to own or invest. So the year ending 2019 results of the Toronto real estate market is all about this story of the supply and demand. So when it comes to the supply side, it's all about the new listings. And so for the month of December, on a year-over-year basis, the number of new listings, we can see we're down 18%. And when we look at this chart over on your right-hand side, you can see that orange bar is looking very, very low. And that's all about, the number of new listings people are choosing to list their home at that time of the year was down compared on a year-over-year basis. And 18% is pretty significant. But more significantly, that we're going to find out with the number of sales that have been going on, the number of active listings, right? Because every month you have like an active number of listings. Some sell, and then some new ones come in, and then you're left with what's the balance. Well, that balance is actually down year over year comparatively 35%. And that's a very relative piece of information because it kind of sets up how the winter market goes and the spring market goes. So that if you have less inventory going into the new year, guess what? If demand is going to be the same, it keeps chewing away at the standing inventory, reduces options, creates more competition between buyers and not a lot of selection, and it can lead to other outcomes, but let's stay focused. Now, when we take the year total perspective, how many new listings we saw throughout the entire year and compare it to the previous year, we're only down 2.4%. So this attrition of listings, when we compare them year over year, sometimes they can sound like a big number, but in the general context of things, it's a pretty average year. So I don't want to dramatize it, like a lot of people like to do. I like to provide you really good, solid information, of course. The underlying story with this is because the standing inventory is down 35%, we need some more listings. And we're here today, we're working on bringing this one out in just a couple weeks. So that's a good indicator of the work we're doing to help feed the market. And we rely on a lot of you. So please do call if you want to put it on the market. It's a great time to sell. So, and let's reinforce that story with the number of sales for the month of December, year over year, we're up 17.4%, right? So that brings us to a grand total of 87,825 sales that took place in the year of 2019. And on a year over year basis, that represents a 12.6% increase. So I know a lot of numbers, right? But when we look at 2018 in its entirety, how many units were sold, and then 2019, there's a 12% difference. So 2018 was softer, 2019 more activity, number of sales. But when we compare 2019 for the last decade, right? How does that compare? It's average. It's average. It's not a bust out year, and it's certainly not one of the slowest years. It's average in terms of the number of transactions that are going on, which I think is also very interesting. And the differential between 2018 and 2019 is an illustration of this idea that a lot of people were put onto the sidelines with the correction in the 2017 market. We saw that blip, and we'll talk more about that. But also the change in mortgage lending guidelines with the stress tests, right? So I think what we're seeing is a lot more people returning to the market, having had an opportunity to absorb that, make some changes, shop in different geographic regions, save some more money, right? And the question is always about, how this dynamic is playing in supply and demand. And I'm going to introduce this slide quickly, and it's not to confuse you, but I'm going to try and give you the sales to new listing ratio explanation. This is a great way to illustrate the consumption of new listings, right? So it gives us a different way of looking at the market where we want to interpret just how strong the demand is, like how fast it's moving. And so when we look at this chart, we can see over on the right side, there's spiking up in December. What that's all about is at the end of the year, there are a lot of people that like the idea of buying something before the holidays, and classically we see prices get a little softer at the end of the year, so there's this idea that you can get a deal. But as the inventory starts to shrink, there's not necessarily any deals to be had, and so it just becomes this dynamic where everything that comes in that's new to the market just gets gobbled up. And that's what this shows. Okay, so I'll give you an explanation. Let's say that we have our active inventory. The number of houses that are on the market is 100, just as an example. And let's say in that same month, we add 50 new listings come onto the market, right at the beginning of the market. So now we have a grand total of 150. Then let's say that out of that 150, 80 of them sell, right? So that's 80, that's gobbles up all the 50 that came new, and it took an extra 30 away from what we had as standing inventory. And now we're left with only 70 listings on the market. And we started the month with 100, right? So that consumption rate, sales to new listing, that's why the bar is like 130% above, the ratio is 130%. But that's how it works. So it's like you're in this dynamic where you have diminishing inventory. And so this chart does also a good job of illustrating how that compares to previous years. And it's not to say that when we look at in that far right bar, the only other bar that shows it being that high is 2016. And 2016 was leading into 2017 with a big correction. There are different dynamics at play. So, we got to be careful about how we use previous history to forecast the future. I think there's a much stronger story when we talk about price. And, there's lots to talk about with price. Price was up on an annual basis, year over year, 11.9%, which sounds like a huge number when you compare it to this time last year. But the average price of a home is now sitting at $838,000 in the GTA. And what I want you to look at in this chart, and just set aside this 12% price growth idea, is look at that orange bar over the last 4 months since September. It has been consistently at that level over the last 4 months. So the average is not really moving that much. But when you look at the other years, the other colored bars, you can see how normally, right, we would see a seasonal downturn in price. And that's just because, the most popular listings sell in the peak of these spring and fall markets, and in the shoulder seasons typically we see leftover listings that have been on the market an above average amount of time. They typically sell for less when you use those strategies of overpricing it and not nailing the market right. You typically sell for less. That's just how it works. But right now in the marketplace, we are seeing real growth, that we're not seeing the seasonal fluctuation that we normally do. So I think that's part of the story going into 2020 that makes it a very strong argument for 2020 being a benchmark year. And so what's going to happen with price, right? You're saying, well, that seems like, it might be another runaway market and I should just cool down what's going on. And I'm going to explain to you why that may not be the best piece of logic. And so this is always a great slide for us to look at annually, I believe. And it is the average price since 1995. And it really shows you this incline that we've been on. And you can see right in the middle of it around 2008, 2009, that was the worst global economic recession North America had seen, and let alone the world. And that was when the US imploded their housing market with the nonsense that they were, poor mortgage underwriting policies, which Canada does a much better job. And so, but we can see the Canadian market has been on this, fluctuating trend, and we can see the peak at the top there was in 2017, and that was the peak, and we did have a bit of a run up, and we can see that run up happened a little bit in 2015-16, and then in 17, and then that was unsustainable growth, too much too soon. Interest rates were too low, perhaps, and then we saw interest rates come up, we saw the mortgage stress test rules come in, and the Fair Housing Act come in by the Liberal government in April of 2017. All of those things combined over time have cooled off the market, and there's been this slow, steady growth. One way for us to look at that, and you see the trend there, you can see the trend is it's slowly ticking up, it's conservative growth, right, which is much more sustainable, and that's why I don't think we're heading into a correction. And then this piece, which is the affordability slide. And you'll remember the affordability slide, here's how it works. It takes the average price of a home, and then it factors in what it costs you to carry that home, and then it divides that into what the average income is in this given area. So what influences that? Interest rates. So if interest rates are going up, the cost index goes up. If salaries are going up, then the index goes down, right? Meaning that you can afford more house the more money you make. The less money you make, you can't afford as much house, right? So, interest rates and salary growth are some of the two key dynamics in this slide. And you have to understand why it's hovering right around this 43 percentile when you kind of draw a straight line across. The banks use a total debt servicing load, a TDS factor, in approving you for a mortgage. And so they look at all the household credit that you might have, lines of credit and debt servicing costs associated with a mortgage, property taxes, insurance, and heat, and they factor this into this metric. And so we have a ceiling that we're not really going to see a lot of price growth necessarily when our index is right at its ceiling level. Right? And we can see way back, and this chart goes back to 1986, and you can see where it spiked in 1988, 1989, and that's when we had double-digit interest rates. I kid you not, because we'll get to that in just a sec. But it just says that, where we saw these run-ups in the market in 2015, 16, and 17, you can see how the index was much lower, right? And there was headroom for people to bid property values up. That's not the case today. So I don't think we're going to necessarily see a runaway market, but it's going to be slow and steady growth. Why? Because of immigration. We know Canada has always benefited from having a healthy immigration policy, and it is vital to Canada's sustained economy and growth that we have immigration as a very key element. It is the key element. Canada is made up, we're the most diverse nation on the planet, and living in the Greater Toronto Area is a wonderful example of that. And in the federal government's mind, they have an initiative to allow 350,000 new immigrants to enter Canada in the year 2021. And we've been on this march from around 300,000 to slowly increasing it over the last few years. And we know the majority of new Canadians are landing in the GTA area. And actually, there's almost 100,000 new Canadians that join the GTA every year, which is a phenomenal number. And that number is actually higher than 7 other provinces combined. We just get so many people wanting to live and work here. And why? Of course, we have communities that have their native country people. The communities and culture and religion and schools, and it's a ready-made community is waiting for you here. And we have great social programs. We have great jobs, great paying economic opportunities for new Canadians and their families, and they are ready and willing to contribute to our economy. And it's a vital part of who we are. And with these great communities we're creating, like the Main Street study area, no wonder people want to be a part of it. And so that is a fundamental piece that is not changing. So once again, in this dynamic of what's happening in our marketplace, that is not changing. And until it does, I don't know that we're going to really see a fundamental shift. The other piece of it is interest rates that I spoke about there in that cost index. Where are interest rates now? Well, this chart will show the 5-year mortgage fixed rate over an expanded time frame from ratehub.ca, great resource. We can see how interest rates on fixed rates have been moving very, very little over the last 5 years. Very, very little. And right now, as of today, fixed rates are actually upticking a little bit. You used to be able to get, you could shop in the fall for a fixed mortgage of under 2.8%, which on a 5-year fixed is great. And that's changing. And I think because that's changing, the Royal Bank, I think, just announced, and TD announced that they're increasing rates because bond yields are going up. That's why. And with bond yields going up, because people are freaked out with the tariff wars that are going on in the U.S., so they get out of stocks and they get into bonds, and so that drives the bond yields up, demand on bonds. So, so that translates to fixed rate mortgages, right? So if you're someone shopping for a home and you have a pre-approval for a fixed mortgage rate, it only comes with a 3-month time limit on it. So the bank will come and tell you, say, look, either you buy something over the next couple months, otherwise you're going to have to pay a higher rate. What does that do? Buyers are forced to go out and find a piece of real estate now and get a deal. So that's adding to this dynamic. That's why we're seeing the supply and we're seeing the sales numbers are up, and this is why we're seeing price go up a little bit. So very interesting times in both of those regards. And the last piece is looking at our combined chart, which illustrates the number of sales and average price broken out over the 416 and the 905. And you remember how this chart works. The top half is the fixed numbers, and then the bottom half is the percentage changes year over year. And so we like to pick out where the strongest performers are in the group. So I'll kind of direct you to what we're looking at. And so on the left-hand side, we'll see in the bottom corner, detached, number of sales have gone up in the 416, 38% on a year-over-year basis. So lots of folks buying detached homes in the month of December on a year-over-year basis. Next, number two would be the detached home in the 905 has gone up 23%, like in volume. And then if you need to kind of look at the upper right corner to see where those prices are at. You know, the price of an average detached home in Toronto is $1,363,000. For a 905 home, it's only $957,000. So it's a steal in the 905. Next, we come back over to the bottom right corner. We can see the townhouses both in the 416 and the 905 are up 14 and 21%, respectively. And we can see that the corresponding price up in the upper right, we can see the townhouses in the 416 are $717,000, and in the 905 they're $656,000. Not much of a difference. But they're, you know, when you actually go out and look at product in both of those areas, they are a little bit different. 905 townhouses are bigger and better quality, newer than they are in the city. And then when we look at average price growth, we can see the big winner there, once again, is detached homes on a year-over-year basis. And so once again, you know, it sounds like a big number growth on a year-over-year basis, but last year at this time, it was a very soft finish to the year. So it just illustrates the strength of the market is sustained. Like that average price is very similar. The $1,363,000 through the fall has been pretty consistent. So I would say what's been good for detached homes is we're just seeing the activity pick up. And so that's just great because it keeps the whole market moving, you know, for people that are downsizing, empty nesting, that sort of thing. So it's a good market if you're thinking about making a move that way. Next, we want to just lastly look at where we've said condo growth has been phenomenal across the board all year long. And we can see that average price growth in the 905 was almost 12%, and in the 416, 10.3%. I have several clients shopping for some smaller condos in the Toronto area, and this first week of January has been quite challenging. Very little inventory, lots of demand. And that just makes it challenging to buy. And as soon as it comes to market, it sells almost the same day or within a couple days if they're in the popular neighborhoods. The 905 is a little more of a balanced market, but in the prime areas inside the city, it takes a seasoned professional to help you land a good one. And that's my advocacy for what we do. So with that, I'm going to say if you're planning a move in 2020, you really want to have the expertise and the professionalism of a trusted advisor. And that's the role we play for many of you. We thank you for that ongoing trust, and we look forward to serving you today and into the future. Call on us anytime. We're here to help. Until next time, I'm Matt Emerson of RE/MAX Hallmark, Emerson Group Realty. Bye for now.